The time has come for my people to go.
I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's what the people demand, and we gonna keep fighting till we get that land. I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's time to rise, to get what we want, we got to organize.
Greetings, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Pantsula Podcast, brought to you by the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. For those of you not familiar with the A-APRP, we were founded by Kwame and Nkrumah in 1968 with an objective of Pan-Africanism, and we define Pan-Africanism as the total liberation of Africa under scientific socialism. Today, I have my fellow comrade Sadiq, who I'll let introduce the two ancestors we'll be honoring today.
Hey everyone, so as you know, every episode we honor two of our ancestors. So the first ancestor we're going to honor today is Sam Nujoma. He is a Namibian revolutionary, anti-apartheid activist, also a politician who served as the first president of Namibia. I believe he served 3 terms from 1990 to 2005. Nujoma was a founding member of SWAPO, which stands for Southwest Africa People's Organization, back in 1960. He established also the People's Liberation Army of Namibia, which acronym is PLAN, as planned, in 1962, and launched the guerrilla war against the apartheid government in South Africa in August of 1966. So Nujoma led the SWAPO during the lengthy Namibia War for Independence, which lasted for about 23 years. So much respect and praise to the ancestor Sam Nujoma. The next person that we're honoring for this episode is Phyllis Wheatley. Phyllis Wheatley was actually considered the first African in America, enslaved African in America, who published their first book of poetry. She was also an abolitionist who stemmed from West Africa. It said that she came from the Senegal-Gambia region. She was sold into slavery actually at the age of 7 and transported into North America, where she was bought by the Whitley family in Boston. In addition to the classical techniques, Whitley also applied biblical symbolism to evangelize and to comment on slavery. So for instance, she wrote a poetry called On Being Bought from Africa to America, which is actually one of the best known poems from Whitley as well. So much respect to Phyllis Wheatley as well. Definitely always want to commemorate and remember the legacies of these two revolutionaries and any other revolutionaries that we commemorate these episodes to. So today, I guess in line with these revolutionaries, we're actually going to be speaking about how Africans have saved themselves, historically, and maybe even more so in contemporary times. So I guess we could probably start off with, what are some examples of times where we've probably seen Africans save themselves, and essentially what were they saving themselves from? And if anything, like what are we continuing to save ourselves from or trying to save ourselves from too as well?
So for time immemorial, Africans have been trying to save themselves from exploitation, from enslavement, from the stealing of their land and resources, and have been fighting consistently for as long as we can remember. Some specific examples. So let's say in the US, so recently has been Juneteenth, a situation in which Africans who were enslaved in Texas realized that they had the quote unquote legal right to be free, and so they freed themselves. If we want to look earlier, we can still on the Western Hemisphere, we can look at Haiti and the efforts made to fight revolution and fight for freedom among all African peoples in that country.
Yeah, Haiti is a perfect example, I think, of that, of Africans liberating themselves. I think even staying within the Western Hemisphere, you can look at the likes of like Martin Delaney, Nat Turner, Tugman, who've all struggled I think the premise a lot of the times is, that, I guess, quote unquote, for lack of a better term, being like white savior complex, where it's like, oh, Abraham Lincoln emancipated the slaves, right? Like he pretty much like had to, right? Because like, there was so much insurrection at that time within the states, that he had to find a way. And then also too, the North was losing the war against the South in the Civil War. So he also had to, allow Africans to pick up guns to fight, for their freedom, essentially. So yeah, Africans have always saved themselves. When you look at even during the colonial period, I think it was estimated a lot of the times, at that time frame, that colonialism was probably going to last. Direct colonialism was going to last like forever, right? But Africans struggled. You look at Ghana, you look at Guinea, you look at Tanzania, you look at so forth and so on. Mali under Modibo Keita. These people struggled. It's not just them. I don't want to individualize it. Obviously, these people had organizations behind them, the masses behind them, to eradicate colonialism. Obviously we're still dealing with neocolonialism, and there's still struggles that are happening on the continent via multiple revolutionary organizations, or just organizations in general on the continent and even off the continent struggling against imperialism and neocolonialism. So I think the whole notion that, Africa just sat and waited, if we sat and waited, we would never be free.
Yeah.
Because the whole premise is to keep us oppressed, because it's in the interest of the ruling class to keep us that way. So if it's up to them, they would be like, oh, you guys will never be free. Obviously they will change how things are manifested or how things may look on the surface, but the structure won't change. The principles will still be the same, essentially. So, which is embedded in exploitation, murder, genocide, like it's, theft. So yeah, so that whole notion, oppressed people always free themselves. Like the oppressor is not going to free you. That never happens. This never will happen. Like, to believe that is a fallacy at the end of the day, and I'm materialist to think that way. But I guess and I guess I probably answered the second question, because we're in the sense of what they save themselves, where they save themselves from. I guess at that time, one thing you can add on top of colonialism and imperialism is slavery, right? Like enslavement, and one could argue that like slavery, in the sense, obviously, is not as brutal or it's not as direct and egregious as, slavery as we know it to be, from Western Europeans and dealing with the transatlantic slave trade. But we're dealing with like wage slavery and things of that nature. So, we deal with like, there was forced labor that happened too as well on the continent. And even off the continent, obviously, here in the America stuff too. So, I guess another question I think in line with this is, I guess, what methods have we seen Africans use to liberate themselves? And I guess what can we learn from those methods that were used?
I would say most of the methods relied on using the masses of the people to work together to create things. So in the case of Haiti, we can see people like Toussaint Louverture. He worked with many generals and worked with many people in the country to establish guerrilla warfare tactics and establish ways that they could fight and use the knowledge of the lands and their own like knowledge in order to fight.
Yeah, and I think we have seen guerrilla warfare not only in Haiti. We've seen it with the Maroons in Jamaica. We've seen it also with Africans on the continent. Amilcar Cabral fighting against the Portuguese. And not let me not just say Amilcar Cabral. I'm sorry, y'all. Let me stop individualizing. The PIGC in Guinea-Bissau, struggling against the Portuguese as well. You talk about Angola, and but we see it in Angola. We've seen it in all over, right? Like all over the continent. We've seen this happen where, guerrilla warfare, but we also seen, I guess, like non-violent methods being used as a tactic as well. Where you want to talk about Martin Luther King, whether you want to talk about during Ghana, under the Convention People's Party and Nkrumah, where they were able to liberate themselves without engaging in guerrilla warfare. Now I think it's always best to be under the notion or understanding that essentially these things are tactics on how to liberate yourself. Like you can't just have, it's funny, speaking back to the PIGC and Cabral, they actually at first tried nonviolent methods. They started to realize like this isn't working. So, they recalibrated and obviously engaged in revolutionary, guerrilla warfare at the end of the day. So I think we should always understand that these things aren't principles, they're methods on how to liberate yourself. That if you find that one tactic isn't working, you need to switch up and, try another one, right? As long as you don't deviate from your principles, I think that's the main thing that we need to have an understanding on, is that, we're looking for egalitarian society system in place. And we're going to do, quoting Malcolm X, by any means necessary to achieve that. So.
Yeah, the tactics aren't always copy and paste. We can always look at what's been done before, and it's almost vital to look at what we've done before in order to understand like different mistakes or different learning points or different pieces of advice that would be vital to our liberation. And so things aren't copy and paste, but we can still learn from them. One thing that we do see is that we didn't really buy our way out of freedom. We can't really use the tools of the people who are oppressing us in order to stop that oppression, especially when they gain from the tools that we're using.
So you're telling me I can't circulate the black dollar and liberate myself? Is that what you're telling me, brother? Is that
not if not if that dollar goes back to the people who are oppressing you, no.
Yeah, and it's not to say that, once again, I think I've stated this and other comrades have probably insinuated it too as well. It's like, when we say stuff like that, isn't saying that, oh yeah, we don't need funding or we don't need money for our organizations. Is that when you reduce the struggle to just, oh yeah, like, I could get, $10,000, $100,000, whatever, and that's going to automatically have us free. Like, no, this has to do with institutional power. Us owning, controlling the means of productions, us owning, controlling our destiny. And that doesn't come because someone wrote you a check or someone, the only reason money has power is because we give it power. Historically, now and in the future, land has always been power. And that's why those people who are in power now are in power, is because they have, control over land and resources. So unless we have that, we won't, and I don't mean controlling the land by getting a loan from the bank, because at that point you don't own that land. If the bank gave you the money for it, it's not your land. And you can't, and you won't have enough money to kick out all these capitalists off their land by just like getting paid. Like, they're not going to allow that. Like, they own these financial institutions and things of that nature. They're not going to just like, oh yeah, here, take all this money and we're going to just, give you guys money and allow you to overthrow us and, all our power, usurp our power, giving land and stuff like that, giving land to you guys, just by you cutting a check, whatever. So I think we have to come under that realization too as well, that it's going to take struggle. They're in power because, they want it to be that way. They wanted to keep that dynamic that way, for as long
and
as
they use force to maintain that dynamic.
Exactly. Like, we're going to deal with repression at the end of the day. So like, we can't be idealists and think that, repression is not going to happen in these struggles, or they're not going to enforce power, or there's not going to be any consequences for trying to usurp their power. So yeah, and we see that time and time again, when Africans have attempted to save themselves, there's been repression over and over. They throw you in jail, they kill you, they kill leaders and movements, and, the COINTELPRO, CIA operations all over the world and stuff like that. Like we've seen that happen over and over and over again. It's like a part of the imperialist playbook at the end of the day, to ensure their power.
And so for that, like next steps shouldn't be us saying, oh, it's impossible for us to liberate ourselves because they're just gonna fight back against us. We have to think about, okay, assuming that they fight back against that, what is our defense and what is our offense? How can we liberate ourselves despite the oppression that we may face because of it?
Exactly. Yeah, because I think sometimes we could get jaded and then, feel like, oh, there's nothing we could do. And I think for me, I always say a turning point in my life and understanding, like, or getting out of, like, to some degree, because I had a short period in, me getting some type of PE where it was just like, oh, this is all bleak. This is all bad. This is what, like, but what turned the corner for me was the fact that, like, I started to widen my scope in relation to, like, international politics. And you start to see, people on the continent winning, even here, like and then even joining the organization, you start to get nuance to understanding or seeing how, small wins are happening, like even in the Imperial Core, whatever the case is, like through alliances. But even more so, our org is a Pan-Africanist org. So we're very tied into what's going on the continent too, as well. So, seeing that stuff happen on the continent and other places too, like, Bolivia, Venezuela. I know right now the election in Colombia is going on. So peace and power to the people in Colombia. And hopefully, it's a democratic election and, the West could get their hands off of that or keep it as well. But, we see what's going on, just all over the world. And I think that gives you optimism in some degree, like, okay, like there's people who are struggling like us here, like locally or like wherever we're at in our respective locales, like trying to organize for power as well. So I think that's also important, like you stated, like having that optimism. But I think the optimism comes a lot of times when you widen your scope to have that broad analysis to what's going on contemporarily in the world, and then also engaging in revolutionary struggle and seeing the details of what may be going on in the background that is not publicized in the media, whatever the case. So I think those are very important things to understand and know to help you because a lot of things. Mm-hmm. I think even if you just look at it on a surface level, like you see things like, impacting your everyday to-day life. And it is dialectical, like, yeah, like, it is deplorable the conditions that we live under. I don't make it seem like, oh yeah, like just because this is happening in another country, like everything's all good here. Like, no, it's not. Like it's dialectical. It's two sides to this. Like, yeah, like it's bad. But at the same time, you can't let that jade your vision on what the ultimate objective is and, what's being done on the ground to achieve that. But if you're not in that struggle to understand what's going on the ground, you never know. And you're always going to think it's all bad. So that's why we always implore you every episode to join the organization. We don't say it because it's like a catchphrase or because Kwame Ture said it and it sounds cool. Like we say it because all those things, like to change the material conditions of people is going to take organization. We don't believe in anarchy. Like, I'm not, disparaging anyone for being an anarchist. If that's what you want to do, that's what the world you think is going to save people. Hey, listen, for me personally, we don't, and I think as an org, we don't, because we're an organization. We believe in the organized masses, achieving power, and that's the way we're going to achieve power, I should say. So, yeah, like that's historically has been true. So from my understanding, is a materialist analysis. So, yeah.
And being in organization, it allows you to see a lot of the progress that is being made. And allow you to actually interact with the people who are making that progress. Yeah. And then also allows you to participate in making that progress as well in a much easier fashion than trying to go at it alone. Exactly. Yeah. And with that, like sometimes jaded mindset that like we'll never get to a point of liberation. With that underlying like narrative, sometimes it's said that progress for Africans is just viewed as something that was given to us. Mm-hmm. So like emancipation from chattel slavery was just something that was granted to us by like a president or by a political party, or freedom from slavery for Haitians was seen as, oh, like France gave that to them, or the British had other things to worry about, so they stopped participating in the war.
Mhm.
What are some underlying assumptions behind this narrative that it wasn't Africans who fought for their own liberation? It was just like institutions and governments who granted their liberation to them.
I think just that is the fact that the governments have done it themselves. Like someone was sitting high up and signed a paper, and then that's why it's framed like that in our history books, is because they don't want us to revolt. They don't want us to understand the revolutionary context and when these things take place. They want us to think that, oh yeah, we could like go out and vote for the likes of a Biden, and he could go up and free us. Like we don't have to do anything. We could just plead, all while being disorganized. Not even, even if you were to plead to a Biden to go, try to create some type of pressure, at least be in an organization if you believe that that's going to liberate you. But even in the cases, like, they want to make these things seem like spontaneous things that are not tied to history or don't give historical context, just think these things just happen in silos. But really, these things are coordinated. These things are organized. These things have historical context, essentially. So once you tie that in, you start to realize, like, no, like Africans didn't just, get free because, some president signed a paper and said it. A lot of times the historical context in most cases is kind of what I alluded to earlier, was Africans revolting, Africans uprising, and they having to be like, oh, okay, we have to do something about it. Like even when we think of free lunch came about through the Black Panther Party because the Panthers were giving free breakfast programs and stuff like that. So they were like, oh no, like we need to reorient this to ensure that we don't grow this ideology or this organization even further, so the state can provide these services. Because what the Panthers were doing was heightening contradictions, meaning that, oh, like the state doesn't give us food, but the Panthers do. So screw the state. Like they're not giving me what I need, So like the state recognizes that, like, oh, we have to make these, have to make appeasements and give people these, like even all like even the small welfare programs that we do have in the United States, even though, like, once again, they're small. Even the small ones that we do have historical context to it, as well, because people have struggled for it. People in the organizations have got up and struggled and said, no, this is not okay. We need at least like this bare minimum, whatever, right? So the state had to come in and provide that in order to thwart any attempt at revolution. So yeah, I think that premise of someone sitting up high and, signing a paper just because of like their, moral good deed or whatever, right? And I think as you study more, you like start to read more and like understand, like these people in these positions are, one, controlled by financial institutions, capitalist organizations, peerless organizations, but two, that both the multinational corporations or transnational corporations that control these folks have no morals. They're immoral. They don't care. The only thing that they pray to and serve is capital, profit. That's all they care about. Extraction, exploitation. That's all that's the underlying principle to everything they do. So
yeah, a lot of the gains and benefits we have in the U.S. Was fought for by and organized by generations of people. If it wasn't for those people, we wouldn't have stuff like free education, welfare, financial support for people who are financially struggling, and even those those things have been being chipped away every day, every bill, every attempt to remove these things that people have fought for generations. And it's very important that we keep on fighting to even maintain these things. Um, and one example is like the bus boycott in Montgomery. So it's often portrayed as something that was just a spur of a moment type of thing, but it was very much a planned event in which Rosa Parks was part of the overall organization, and it was planned that she would be in the bus and then she would say no. It wasn't something that like just came out of the blue. It was something that like the masses of people knew and were prepared to fight for and organize to do such things.
Exactly. Like, tying in that historical context is always a necessity. Like you said, these things don't come out the blue at all. So don't believe any story that doesn't add up. Like, I think that's something we also have to do is like as a people is get better at investigating things and not just, someone just tells you, oh, this just happened randomly. Nothing happens randomly. You talk about like being materialist analysis, like you have to historical materialism plays a role in everything. So we have to understand that, like, and utilize that to form an analysis instead of just thinking that, oh yeah, that's why they could tell you, the war in Ukraine just came out of nowhere. It just happened, the reason why it happened was just because what happened over the past few months. Like, no, it's
But then what happened in 2014?
exactly. And even before then, like, like talks and discussions and stuff like that, whatever, right? Like that's been going on over years, even before the coup took place in 2014. So yeah, so I think we always have to understand that. And obviously those in power want to ensure, those in power in the imperial court want to ensure that we stay ideologically confused, or just confused in general, about these things and not have that understanding. So yeah, I guess maybe if you could give some more examples of like, where the symbolism of granting freedom to Africans like not match up with realities of the many Africans on like who they were essentially.
I guess given the anniversary of Juneteenth, that's a huge example. So with Juneteenth, Africans in Texas realized about 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was passed, that proclamation was passed. So even in the U.S. where the Emancipation Proclamation, the North won, quote unquote, there should be no slavery, given that like legal slavery ended. There are still people who were enslaved in the same kind of chattel slavery years later. And then if you look at different places in the South, there was still slavery going on really up until maybe like the 1960s, 1980s, and like various forms. So even when there is a legal statement that all people are free, that's definitely not always the case.
Exactly. And I would even say too, like when you think about the enslavement of Africans on the continent, and then after that period you have colonialism, and like even during that time period when slavery was abolished, you had Europeans saying like, oh yeah, Western Europeans like, oh yeah, we're in here trying to improve the conditions of the Africans and spread Christianity or whatever, right? And they were trying to use that as a guise to for imperialist and colonialist expansion. Right. So like, but they try to make it seem as though, yeah, we're building hospitals and we're building all this, but the truth is, or the matter of fact, is the fact that, or we're trying to emancipate or free Africans. The truth is that you're not building any of these institutions for the service of Africans. You're not building these things, to serve the people. You're building these things to exploit the people. So they try to make it like, oh yeah, colonialism is a good thing. And you may have some Africans, even though it was such a long time ago, you may have some Africans due to the backward educational system in the U.S. And in other places where they have control or power influence. They try to teach that in schools to some degree. And it may not be blatant or overt, but it may be insinuated in some of these texts that like that's what happened during those periods. Essentially, but that's not really what the case is, because as you can see, during the colonial period, people took up arms, people struggled on many levels, to ensure that they weren't dealing with that level of exploitation and brutalization during that time period, or deprivation too as well. Yeah, they're always going to frame it as though like, oh yeah, we're giving you freedom, and it's like it doesn't match up with the material reality of like what's really going on at the end of the day. Whether you're talking about Africans or enslaved here, and I think even maybe you could draw the line even now, or make the parallel even to like now, where they try to conflate you having money as like true power, like money is power. Like, hey, you're free because you could
Buy whatever you want.
buy whatever you want. You could engage in consumerism, and that's what makes you free. But in actuality, like, no, that doesn't make you free. That hasn't made anyone free, and isn't going to make anyone free at the end of the day. So I think we always have to look at it from that lens. I think it would behoove us to do that, and it will serve our purpose at the end of the day. So I think another thing that we constantly see, which is aligned with some of the things we already talked about, but just came to mind just to mention this, but like we always see that quote unquote white savior complex, whether it's in movies, books, or mass media. Maybe we could talk about that a little bit and exactly like what purpose did that serve, and like why do we constantly see that, even in some cases history books, movies, and in mass media. So
I think we see it as a way to assuage guilt from the quote unquote white saviors. So if we look at like recreations of historical movies or historical dramas, sometimes we'll put a white savior there to paint the narrative of, like not everybody was bad. There are good people in the world. Um, and I think it's kind of used to distract us from the underlying systems that were present and the systems that are there in order to oppress the masses of the world. It puts it on a very individualist. There are good people in the world. There are good people in this group, and then makes a question about, oh, are there good people in this group or are there not? Which is kind of a distraction because there's good people in every group, uh, and the masses of people work towards freedom uh, and distract us from the actual institutions, the actual like corporations, governments who have material interest in oppressing the masses of people, uh, and distract us from, okay, what are those people doing now? What are those companies uh, doing now? And how are they oppressing people? How are they trying to exploit people?
exactly, yeah, you hit it right on the head, man. I think that's essentially what it is to keep us distracted, and then also to project that image, so we still look at them in that light, or we just look at them in that light, not still, but like look at the ruling class in the light of, oh yeah, they're here to help, so that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna just always ask them for help when they're not really here to help, and obviously they're gonna frame it as though like, oh yeah, I am here to help, like go ahead and sign your life away here on this dotted line, or like this is how I'm going to help you right here, let's sign this, advocate for more policing in your neighborhood so we could terrorize you some more and brutalize you more. Go ahead and advocate for more mass incarceration so we can profit off of prison labor, go ahead, so forth and so on. So they're going to keep framing these things, and they try to frame these things as humanitarian acts, even down to like the charities, like whenever it comes down to like, oh yeah, do you want to donate to this, nonprofit organization, which is, probably some big nonprofit that, makes profit, makes, abundance of money or something like that, right? Where they don't really serve material needs, like conditions for people. So I always say no to those things, even though they try to have it under the guise of that. Like, I'd rather put my money to an organization that's on the grassroots level, really doing the work with the people, looking to serve the people at the end of the day. But yeah, I think the whole purpose of that is just to have people more embedded in the capitalist and imperialist systems, and more embedded in that bourgeois ideology at the end of the day, and just have people feel like there's no hope outside of what we present to you. There's no alternative. Don't think to even imagine outside of this reality, because there isn't none. Right? But we know that to be false. When we look at other countries outside the U.S. who have struggled and have socialist societies or working towards a socialist society as well. So where people were getting, free healthcare, housing is provided, medicine is provided, technology is being improved on, so forth and so on. Economies are expanding under socialist societies and stuff like that. So, yeah, I think that's essentially what it serves at the end of the day.
Yeah. And one last question: how do you get a better understanding of fellow Africans' involvement in their own emancipation? And then, what resources can we use to learn more about the work that Africans have done towards liberation?
Yeah, I think stands back to, I feel like all these episodes are like one big record, broken record player. It's like join an organization, get in PE, and if you feel like maybe you don't have, I don't know why you may not be able to join the organization. I'm not going to assert any reasons why certain people can't. And everyone may have their own valid reason, but like, even if you feel like you can't do that, start small with like you know, a book club or something, or like just start reading text with you and your friends, and try to work through various reading lists, or and if you feel like you're lost on a reading list, feel free to reach out to anybody in the A-APRP. Hit up our contact us on how do you build a reading list, or what reading list should we use, or whatever, because we have our own text and reading lists and stuff that we do read. If you know me, you see this episode, you know me, you follow me on social media or something like that, reach out to me. I could give you some text, but I think it's also always better when you are reading and trying to get an understanding on things to do it in a group setting, to bounce ideas, to get different takes, to question things better. Because if you're reading it yourself, you may be dealing with confirmation bias. You may be dealing with, other aspects that may deter you from getting a true analysis, especially early on when you're just first starting to read and trying to understand, the political space that we're in, or the political trajectory as well. So I think that's always best to go about it, is to do it in a group setting, whether it's in an org, whether it's in like a group setting where it's like a work study, not work study, book club. At the end of the day, there's I think that's the best way anyone could go about it. I think also trying to read articles as well. It's not just books. Read some articles and read some papers on these things. And once again, also watch our episode on dialectical materialism, where it helps you form an analysis, where we go and dive into the benefit of using dialectical materialism and reading both sides, understanding that things change constantly, understanding that there's a material component to everything as well. So definitely tune in, go to our channel. If you're not subscribe, and then go back and watch our episode on dialectical materialism as well. So yeah.
And are there any other podcasts?
Yeah. Great plug-in. Plug-in. Yeah, there's plenty of other podcasts from the A-APRP that we have. Not only do we have the Pantsula Podcast, which you guys are tuning into, definitely once again subscribe to our channel. We also have the Forward Ever Podcast, which is on Spotify, and these links will be below in the description. We also have the New Mexico chapter. I believe they do theirs every Thursday as well. We have the Revolutionary African Women. We also have our ancestors' voices as well, which is done by our comrades Shakura and Ajamu. So you could tap into any of those. Also, I know this link won't be in the description, but if you can tap into Hella Block podcast by the comrades over People's Program as well. That's a good source to get the political education as well. So those are some of the, and then also, if you're down to support the All African People's Revolutionary Party, you enjoyed this episode and you want to find, maybe you can't join the organization now, you want to find, how can I support them and stuff like that. We have a clothing shop that you could, buy our gear, our attire as well. If you don't like the clothes on there, hey, you could just send us, money on Cash App. I believe we have PayPal. as well. So if you want to support there, I'm gonna try to put that in the bio as well, in the description as well for you guys to help support. But with that being said, you have any last words, Winfred, before we sign off?
Yes, like Africans have always been the ones freeing other Africans. Let's continue that tradition.
Yeah, struggle for justice, join an organization fighting for justice. We can't do it on our own. None of us have, none of us will. And if you feel like you can, please free us. I need to be free. Listen, I want to be free. So I think
Me too.
You did a survey. I'm pretty sure the masses will tell you the same thing. So if you feel like you can do it yourself, why ain't you doing it? If not, then that tells you probably need to be in an organization doing this. So once again, we appreciate you joining us for another episode of the Pantsula Podcast. Tune in to us. We air these episodes every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we look forward to having you on the next episode and forward ever.
Forward ever.